Perfect. Okay, can you all hear me okay? My main mission is to keep on this 10-minute thing. It's like Pecha Kucha times 2, so I'm going to aim for that. I was kind of asked to not talk about my practice, but I kind of am, in the sense that I'm talking about some of the things that sort of influence it. Recently I'd made some sculptures with holes in, and it caused me to think about why sculptures, abstract sculptures with holes in, are a cipher for modern art particularly. And I also thought about, how I'm quite interested in the idea of sort of literalizing jokes. And the title actually is not just a kind of completely outmoded, slightly sexist thing. It's from one of these comic images talking about one of the sculptures. So I'd also wanted to think about how you can get away with stuff in cartoons that you can't get away with otherwise, and I think in a way almost generate sculptures that are better than real sculptures sometimes. So I'm going to try and use this pointer to do things. So this is somebody going to visit an artist, which is appropriate. But thinking about holes, and I didn't want to think too much about Europe just now, but this is an April Fool's for Polo Mints from the mid-1990s. And I'm really into reading old tomes about sculpture and Rosalind Krauss and things like that. And I was thinking about the Polo Mints, and she'd written that about Henry Moore, because Henry Moore is one of the people that a lot of the cartoonists take the piss out of. She wrote that the extremities terminate explicitly within the limits of the original mass of material from which the figure is hewn, which is very much like a polo. Here are some polo holes, which is just the middle bit, so that's the hole like actuated as a thing. This was for sale on Gumtree, and I don't know why, maybe people didn't understand how to use Gumtree, but they put £1 million next to it as the price, but advertised as Polo Mints, brackets, polo holes, and polo supermint, close brackets, limited edition from St Helens in Merseyside. And they go on to explain that it's unopened from the 1st of October 1997. And it's mint condition, I guess. So I began to kind of think about this thing about the holes and the nature of the idea of what was interesting about the cartoons is they're talking about what it contains, which is essentially nothing, and that's the gag. And it's also this thing about the simplicity of the forms is always a kind of central thing in all the jokes. So it's kind of this thing where the cartoonists kind of have this range from something that's like affectionate, a pastiche, to something that's actually quite hostile and everything in between. So it's kind of like the artist is sort of the underdog, the sort of butt of the jokes, but there's a sort of reciprocal relationship going on in there. So I've got a few examples of things. I like to collect examples of sculptures with holes from cartoons. So often they're sort of repurposed, which I think is quite interesting. And that's the thing that kind of, they're claiming the abstract shape with a hole in the middle is kind of a nothing. So it's this idea that these objects, particularly ones with holes in, are the best way to show a bit of modern art. So it's this kind of thing like, if you're trying to depict a modern painting, it's a face with both eyes on the same side of the nose. And if you're trying to show a sculpture, you're essentially showing something that's a bit like a potato with a hole in it. So it's this idea of kind of beginning to torture sculpture, loosen its logic, let it all kind of fall apart, let its meaning kind of fall away and be replaced as a sort of vehicle for other things to happen. So in all these things, they're being repurposed, and that's the central gag. And it's almost like you can go and buy a Henry Moore, and the string is coming from a sculpture as well, a Hepworth thing with string you use to wrap your parcel. So in some of these, they're kind of, you get this thing where they're having a shootout, a gangster shootout, shooting through the shapes. And I think it's that thing again of thinking about this thing that, I guess from the Festival of Britain, the reclining figure from Henry Moore is the thing that is this central thing. Just because it was really core to the advertising of the Festival of Britain, it was on an enormous plinth at the South Bank, and it's the one that kind of got knocked the most, metaphorically speaking. So here's one that actually relates to Henry Moore, and this is one of the images that I'd used in my own work, this kind of avocado, come potato, come sort of bowling pin, gaining holes or losing holes, depending on how you see it. So I think you see that these objects of the Henry Moore in the Festival of Britain film, and the idea of it's showing Henry Moore to so many people through the film that wouldn't have seen it before. So it allows it to become this thing that can exist in cartoons. So look, this poor chap here. So the title of what I'm talking about comes from this one, which is after these. This is actually the. You see how pleased she is when he's finally died. This image here, which is referring directly to the Festival of Britain, and this idea that you're thinking very much. It's like, what is the figure lacking? And it's lacking its stomach, which brings me back maybe to food and polo mints and things to do with food a little bit more. And it's this idea that, you know, he's reminded of the thing that's anything but what the sculpture's about. As Krauss says again, going back to my favourite Krauss tome, the exterior mass cradling a void at its centre like a vital organ, but the vital organ being the stomach that isn't there, which is quite interesting. And thinking about the April Fools and the EU regulation on polo mint holes, my last few images are actually sort of a repetition of the same thing, which is a restaurant in Glasgow called the Mediterranean, which is apparently a champagne bar. And then you can see this strange sculpture, actually, which is a bit like a kind of Henry Moore, but also looks a bit like a mask from a Scream movie, melting kind of horrified face. And I began to think again about what's it represent as a restaurant? The Mediterranean could be lots of things. And as I was thinking more and more about that face and kind of zooming in on that face, I was thinking about that void or that kind of declivity in the centre of stuff. And the Mediterranean could be lots and lots of different countries like Spain or Monaco or Slovenia or Algeria or the Gaza Strip surrounding the Mediterranean. And there he is. Thank you.